Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Garrett Smith, known as the nutrition detective around his YouTube parts. And for those of you who saw my live stream yesterday, we're on the same topic. I decided to redo it because one of my Facebook friends posted an old thing of mine about vitamin D3 actually being researched as a biological weapon to be used against people. And I didn't include that in my video yesterday, and I thought I would. So anyway, quick little housekeeping here. For those of you who are interested in working with me individually after this, you can find that stuff at nutritionrestored.com. And if you're interested in the do-it-yourself, not working directly with me, vitamin A detox program, the original and best, that is at nutritiondetective.work. Two different sites. We're working on bringing them together, but we haven't gotten there yet. So, vitamin D as a known poison. Did you know this? We're going to get to that. So first, I like to go over one of my favorite papers. It is from the journal Cardiovascular Research. It was from back in 1997, which is before the big vitamin D health fad started. So they knew about this before the big recent vitamin D3 fad started. And did you know there was another vitamin D fad in the past that ended in disaster too? Have you ever wondered where all the improved health stuff is since so many people started taking vitamin D supplements? Isn't it kind of weird that people's health just keeps seeming to go more downhill? But we figured out this major vitamin D thing. We got so many people taking vitamin D because they read it on the internet or their doctor told them to. And yet, then COVID comes around and everybody's getting so sick. Fortified milk, all this stuff. Anyway, maybe there's a coinkydink around here. So, from this paper, Hypercalcemia and metastatic calcification, all the references will be put in the comments once I'm done. So look for them there if you want to look at these papers. So from this paper, part 1, vitamin D intoxication. I grew up in Edinburgh at the same latitude as Copenhagen, and then covered by a pall of coal smoke, which gave it the sobriquet Old Reeky. Many bandy-legged and dwarfed citizens carried the legacy of rickets, contracted before the discovery of vitamin D, the fortification of food, and the Clean Air Acts. However, vitamin D, good in the right dose, is dangerous in overdose, and there is no doubt that Gorham's Vikings miscalculated the dose-response curve of cod liver oil. A teaspoon would have been a better implement than their ladle or Mrs. T's tablespoon. In view of their formidable achievements, it is likely that the Vikings escaped the worst effects of vitamin D intoxication by irregular dosage and non-compliance. Their cavalier approach was repeated with more disastrous results after 1924, when high doses of tasteless ergocalciferol, vitamin D2, from irradiated ergosterol became available and were indiscriminately prescribed for rheumatoid arthritis, tuberculosis, Paget's disease, and chilblains, in none of which it has shown to produce benefit and osteoporosis. So we're going to take a break there. If you guys haven't seen my cod liver oil video and all the research showing bad stuff about cod liver oil on this channel, you're going to want to go find that video. Because the research on cod liver oil that you haven't been shown is outrageous. And then if you want to, you should go watch the video about all the case studies of people getting poisoned from liver in one sitting. What does the liver store? Well, it stores vitamin A and it also stores vitamin D. Coincidences everywhere. So 1924, vitamin D2 came out. Vitamin D2 is thought to be only about 60% as effective as D3. The body can convert it. And there's already been a trend of poisonings from vitamin D, D2, back in the 1920s when they came out of it, when they thought it was going to fix everything. Sound familiar? Continuing. The effects of overdosage were described within 4 years of high-dose ergocalciferol being released for sale. The condition was reviewed in a cluster of papers in the early 1950s. Diagnosis was often delayed because the commonest symptoms were the non-specific ones of hypercalcemia, nausea, vomiting, weight loss, colic, constipation, thirst, polyuria, excessive urination, headache, weakness, apathy, and depression, roughly in that order. You need to know that these poisonings that we're talking about, often with vitamin A poisoning can be quick. It could be one pill of Accutane, or it could take a long time at moderate to mild doses. The vitamin D poisonings, they say the reports started to come out within 4 years of it being introduced. It took a while to start noticing more and more people, enough people getting poisoned. People will say, well, fat-soluble toxins, yeah, they're stored. How do you know? Here's the math on it. If you are taking in more than you are getting rid of, then you are slowly accumulating it in your liver. Vitamin A and vitamin D. So what happens when you've accumulated too much over a year or 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? How are you going to know how to point the finger at something when it was something you started taking 20 years ago? Cod liver oil, vitamin D supplements, whatever, vitamin A supplements, eating a high vitamin A diet. How are you going to figure that out when it took 20 years for the poisoning to really set in? And then you have to undo 20 years of poisoning. This is the reality of this. So let's go into what actually happened with hypercalcemia. Well, let me just back up. Hypercalcemia. Go and look in the research. Vitamin D toxicity or hypervitaminosis D causes hypercalcemia, excessive calcium in the blood. Go look up hypervitaminosis A or vitamin A toxicity. And what does that cause? Oh, it also causes hypercalcemia. Too much calcium in the blood. Hypercalcemia causes you to slowly calcify your soft tissue, slowly or quickly. It can be slow or quick, depending on the dose. It's dose dependent. Why is this paper called Hypercalcemia and Metastatic Calcification? Metastatic, spreading. Calcification all over your body of the soft tissues. That's what we're talking about here. That's what hypercalcemia leads to. Go look up your diseases of choice by their technical term and go and type in radiology and calcification or calcinosis. You might be amazed at what you find, that calcification seems to be associated with all these disease states. Have fun with that one. Continuing, consequently, the half-life of hypercalcemia, which is about 3 weeks when modest therapeutic overdosage occurs, may be more prolonged in severe vitamin D toxicity. One lady who took the Viking mixture of cod liver oil and milk, Weston Price, required treatment for hypercalcemia for 21 months after withdrawal of vitamin D. And another elderly lady intoxicated with ergocalciferol, only 60% as potent as vitamin D3, had elevated blood vitamin D and 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels after 17 months. So the lady who did the cod liver oil and milk, that was 1985. That was long before the vitamin D3 fad and long after the vitamin D2 fad. And when they said they took her off vitamin D, they mean they took her off of cod liver oil and milk. So for those of you who think that natural foods, vitamin A in natural foods is harmless, vitamin D in natural foods is harmless and it's only good for you, you have been misled by people who are denying the basic chemistry of this. Do you actually think that chemists out there would say that the vitamin D that they identify or they synthesize in a lab by irradiating sheep's wool, and they call it vitamin D3 when it's in cod liver oil, do you actually think that those chemists are talking about two different compounds and that they have different effects in the body? Do you think the same about vitamin A? Like when they describe it as retinoic acid, all-trans retinoic acid, for example, and then the all-trans retinoic acid that they put in creams or pills called retin-A. Do you think that those compounds do different things in your body? Do you think that they're different? Do you think they wander around and one's natural and one's not? And when they analyze it in the urine, which they do in tests, and they see that eating high carotenoid vegetables raises your all-trans retinoic acid in your urine and your blood, and that if somebody were to take all-trans retinoin, whether they were absorbing it through their skin or through their digestion, do you think that these compounds do different things? If you do, enjoy your fantasy world, because it's not science and it's not chemistry that you're talking about. You're talking about an appeal to nature fallacy, which means you're thinking that just because it comes from nature that it's good. Nature makes poisons and toxins really well. Maybe you've just been misled. The other study with the ergocalciferol, well, that was 1994. I want you to pay attention. The hypercalcemia in this one woman who did the Viking mixture of cod liver oil and milk lasted for 21 months, high blood calcium for 21 months. Does that mean at the end of those 21 months that there wasn't still an excess of vitamin D or vitamin A in her liver? It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that the obvious things in the blood stopped showing up. And the lady who took ergocalciferol D2, she still had elevated blood vitamin D and 25-hydroxyvitamin D levels after 17 months of not taking it. You have to, your body wants to detox these things. Okay? Continuing from the paper, vitamin D intoxication causes an osteodystrophy, which is still poorly understood. Aches and pains in the back and around joints are common symptoms. You know anybody with aches and pains or low back issues? The bone changes reported in radiological studies are puzzling. Patients receiving the same dosage of vitamin D may have reduced or increased bone density. Reduced bone density from vitamin D. Yet we're giving it to all these people for osteopenia and osteoporosis. Which one is it doing to you? Which one is it doing to your parents? Gosh, and then they go in and they're like, well, your DEXA scan, your bone scan is worse now. Gosh, you should probably take more vitamin D. Oops. I mean, I have to laugh because if I can't laugh at this stuff, watching humanity get poisoned in the name of science is difficult to watch. So if I can't laugh about it, I go insane. Bone problems. It's causing bone problems. Here's the thing what vitamin D does in your body, and this is in the literature. Here's a fun one you can go look up. Vitamin D bone resorption. That's when your body is taking calcium out of your bones. Resorption. It's reabsorbing it from you to put it into the blood. What does vitamin D do physiologically? Well, why would your body adjust its vitamin D levels up and down? That's a good question. Vitamin D is going to raise your blood calcium by hook or by crook. Biologically, that's what it does. If there is calcium in the diet, first the vitamin D goes to your gut and it increases your calcium absorption into the bloodstream. High blood calcium, hypercalcemia. It increases your calcium absorption from the gut. Okay? If there is not a significant amount of calcium coming from the gut, that vitamin D then turns around and goes to your bones and will pull the calcium out of your bones into your blood. raising blood calcium, hypercalcemia. So vitamin D is going to raise your blood calcium by hook or by crook. It will also cause osteoporosis over time if you get too much. What is too much? How much poison does it take? Just enough. That's the answer for everybody. Well, why did this person get problems and this person didn't? There was a whole family, a study on kids getting fed chicken liver pate. One of the boys, the youngest boy, I believe, died. Oh, his mom was just feeding him chicken liver pate. Oh, that's natural vitamin A. It couldn't cause any harm. One boy died. The other two were severely harmed. And the daughter didn't have any problems at all. And they were all eating the same chicken liver pate. Different poisons affect different people differently. How much poison did it take for the dead boy? Just enough. How much poison did it take for the other two boys? Just enough. Did it negatively impact the girl in the family? It apparently didn't very much, which is interesting. Those other boys, they felt it. So just because your brother or your mother or your friend takes vitamin D and it doesn't hurt them yet, because the poison always wins in the end, doesn't mean it can't be affecting you. Okay, continuing. One possible exception was the increased incidence of hypercalcemia in infants taking a dose in the range of 800 to 2000 IU per day from a combination of fortified milk and cod liver oil supplements in the 1950s and 60s. Cod liver oil, vitamin A, hypercalcemia, vitamin D, hypercalcemia, fortified milk, could be vitamin D fortified, could be vitamin A fortified, could be both. And then you add more calcium fuel to the fire, which is milk, and you get hypercalcemia. This is just math. Infants getting poisoned. Next part, a recent outbreak of vitamin D intoxication in Massachusetts was traced to erratic and excessive fortification of milk with ergocalciferol. A concentration of 232,565 IUs per quart, basically a liter, was recorded in homogenized whole milk in place of the recommended 400 to 500 IUs. I believe that's, if we just said 500, I believe that's about 400 times. No, is that 4,000 times? No, about 400 times the amount of vitamin D that's supposed to be in there. Erratic and excessive. 8 customers of one dairy reported hypercalcemia. 5 had renal impairment, kidney damage going on. Subsequent reports showed that the outbreak was more widespread and that under and over fortification of milk and infant formulas were common in the USA and Canada. Only a quarter of the milk samples lay within the prescribed range, and 70% of infant formulas contained more than twice the stated dose. Seems to be happening a lot in infant formulas. Almost put it together when you start seeing attacks on children and the fertility of people. Put these things together. We'll get to that a little later. Okay? 70% of infant formulas contain more than twice the stated dose. Overfortification of milk and infant formulas were common in the USA and Canada. Only a quarter of them lay within the prescribed range. How hard is it to add the right amount of vitamin D to milk? Really, how hard is it that they can't handle it? Or is it a happy little accident on their part? So now I wanted to add one part. So we have the hypercalcemia part, but there's another part to vitamin D and vitamin A technically, but it's another part to vitamin D that happens. Here's a paper I have called Renal Potassium Wasting Induced by Vitamin D. Renal, kidney, potassium wasting. You're losing potassium way too fast. Induced by vitamin D. Now, here's the funny thing. When I was taught hair mineral analysis very long ago, one of the things you could look for in a hair mineral analysis as an indicator of somebody taking vitamin D supplements would be an excessively high hair calcium and an excessively low hair potassium. What was I just saying? Hypercalcemia caused by vitamin D, high blood calcium, which ends up eventually over months causing high hair calcium, and potassium, renal potassium wasting by vitamin D, low hair potassium. What if there was also vitamin A, which causes hypercalcemia? And vitamin A, I have multiple papers showing that vitamin A blocks potassium channels, which would functionally cause a low potassium to show up as well. So they're both doing very similar things. So let's go into this paper. This is short. The present experiments were therefore designed to study the effects of hypercalcemia and nephrocalcinosis, that's the calcification of the kidneys, basically, induced by vitamin D upon renal excretion of potassium and acid. So that's from the abstract. We're going to go a little deeper in the paper. So they had rats that they gave plenty of potassium to, and they had rats that they didn't give potassium to. Okay. It is noteworthy that in experiments in which potassium intake was not restricted, the potassium content of muscle was significantly lower in rats treated with vitamin D than in control animals. Are you getting foot or calf cramps or leg cramps at night and you're taking vitamin D? Calf cramps, foot cramps at night are like guaranteed you're potassium deficient. Now, what if you decide to start taking more potassium, but you're still going to take your vitamin D and you're still going to eat all your food vitamin A or eat your liver or take your cod liver oil and all that? You think you're going to win somehow by getting the poison that's causing the deficiency. I'm going to tell you the poison always wins. So what might happen is your cramps go away for a while and eventually the poison wins out again and then the cramps come back. Maybe you've had this happen to you. It's just biochem. It's just physiology. Summary of this paper. Hypercalcemic nephropathy produced in rats by vitamin D impaired renal conservation of potassium and the ability of the kidneys to excrete ammonium after acid loading. It is suggested that renal potassium wasting and renal tubular acidosis may be acquired as a result of hypercalcemia and hypercalciuria. So high calcium kidney damage was produced by vitamin D. It impaired the kidney's ability to hold on to potassium, so they lost potassium through the urine. And it also stopped the kidneys from being able to get rid of ammonia, a critical waste product for your body to get rid of. So they're saying that this potassium wasting could come from the high blood calcium caused by the vitamin D or other things. What about vitamin A? What about just taking too many calcium supplements? And hypercalciuria, so excessive calcium in the urine. Good study, love this one. Now that we've talked about all these things about hypercalcemia, some of the evidence in people and rats of what it actually does, how could this compound be used in other ways? Well, it's used to kill animals. Could it be used to kill people? I don't know. You're going to have to stretch your brain around that one. This is from the DCON website. DCON is a rodenticide company. They sell products that kill mice and rats, rodents. Okay? So this is a print up from their page. Using decon bait stations as directed on the instructions means it's safer to kill rats in the house than with many other poisons. This is because the active ingredient in our rat bait is vitamin D3, which is harmless to humans, but which mice and rats can't tolerate. Vitamin D3 can be harmful to some other animals, though, depending on their species and size. So if you've got pets, be sure to use one of our dog-resistant bait stations. Okay. So they're admitting here. They're saying that vitamin D3 is safer than other poisons. Okay. It's still a poison. Duh. Mice and rats can't tolerate it. And other animals can't tolerate it because you have to protect your cat and your dog from it. So we start going, okay, so it'll kill small animals and it'll kill bigger animals. These are all mammals. Isn't that the group we fall in? Big group. So we know mice, rats, cats, and dogs. Okay, we can just assume the cats and dogs, right? That's why they make a dog-resistant bait station. Okay, decon. They name it, the name decon. So now here's another paper or another website from I don't know how to say their name, Terad 3 blocks. That's how I'm going to say it, Terad 3 blocks. Okay? So those last two things on that Terad 3, D3. Okay? Terad 3 blocks, premier formula with vitamin D3. Terad 3 blocks expertly combines the most recent advancements in bait formulation to yield a highly weatherable blocks with the benefits of the active ingredient vitamin D3. So they're saying the benefits of D3 are that it's going to kill your mice and rats. That's the benefit of vitamin D3. Okay. Here's the best part. Terad 3 blocks with vitamin D3 kills anticoagulant resistant rats and mice. Most of the rat bait, mice bait that you may have purchased in the past, if you ever did, is anticoagulant based. Maybe you've heard people saying that they don't ever want to take Coumadin or warfarin because that stuff's rat poison. That's an anticoagulant. That stuff's rat poison. You can go out and buy Coumadin, warfarin, rat blocks. They're kind of the standard first level rodenticide. So what they're saying in this Terad 3 blocks is that if the anticoagulant stops working, well, how does an anticoagulant kill rats and mice? It causes them to have they can't clot. They cannot clot. It's an anti-vitamin K2 process mostly. Coumadin and warfarin are anti-vitamin K2. So they can't clot properly. So once they start internally bleeding, which they do once you have that up high enough, they die of internal hemorrhage, massive internal bleeding, which we'll get into in the biological warfare part in a bit about anticoagulants and vitamin D. So what they're saying is the first level is the anticoagulants. And if that doesn't work, because it doesn't work on all rats and mice because they're adapting to it, then you go to the next level rodenticide, which is vitamin D3. Good stuff. Put the stronger poison in that they can't adapt to. You catching on? Yeah. Now, from that same page, Terad D3, or Terad 3, sorry. This is the safety sheet. The OSHA-related safety sheet, safety data sheet. This is from their website. Just wanted to read a couple parts of it so you understand that they're saying it's hard. They say that it's harmless to humans on their webpage, and yet you're going to hear some different things out of here. Okay. So from section 3, composition / information on ingredients. The main component, cholecalciferol. Percent by weight, 0.075%. Not even 1%. Not even 1% of that whole block is vitamin D3. Because the inert and non-hazardous ingredients, wait. The inert and non-hazardous ingredients, which is not vitamin D3, are 99.925% of those blocks. Only 0.075% is vitamin D3. And that's the hazardous ingredient, okay? From section 4, first aid measures. Most important symptoms and effects, both acute and delayed. Ingestion of excessive quantities may cause hypercalcemia, anorexia, not wanting to eat, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, extreme thirst, lethargy, diarrhea, profuse sweating, headache. Those are all those hypercalcemia things that the cod liver oil and Viking milk mixture we're talking about. Same exact things. And they're talking about humans. Advice to physician. There is no specific antidote. If serum calcium levels are elevated, treatment with calcitonin is effective in reducing calcium to normal levels. Continue monitoring serum calcium and treat as necessary for hypercalcemia. Advice to veterinarian. For animals ingesting bait and or showing poisoning signs, induce vomiting by using hydrogen peroxide or administration of activated charcoal with a cathartic. If clinical signs develop, treatment consisting of saline diuresis combined with the use of furosemide, corticosteroids, and phosphate binders are recommended. Calcitonin or pamidronate may be needed for animals that remain hypercalcemic despite symptomatic treatment. Isn't that kind of weird how they give such a detailed approach to treating animals, and yet the ones for people they barely mention anything? I just think that's interesting. Section 6, accidental release measures. Well, wouldn't you think that accidentally releasing a vitamin into the environment might be good? Everybody can get a little more vitamin, including your animals. Oh, wait, maybe not. Personal precautions, protective equipment, and emergency procedures. Gloves should be worn when handling the bait. Collect spillage without creating dust. Okay, so it can be toxic if you absorb it through your skin or if you breathe it in. Okay? Section 7, handling and storage. Precautions for safe handling. Do not handle the product near food, animal foodstuffs, or drinking water. Keep out of reach of children. Well, that'll be important later. Do not use near heat sources, open flame, or hot surfaces. As soon as possible, wash hands thoroughly after applying bait and before eating, drinking, chewing gum, using tobacco, or using the toilet. Conditions for safe storage, including any incompatibilities. Store only an original container in a cool, dry place inaccessible to pets and wildlife. Do not contaminate water, food, or feed by storage or disposal. Keep containers closed and away from other chemicals. Harmless to humans. Section 11, toxicological information. Target organ effects. Damage caused by an accumulation of calcium. That is how it kills the mice and rats. And that is what it does to people. Section 12, ecological information. Ecotoxicity effects. This product is extremely toxic to birds and mammals. Do not apply this product directly to water where surface water is present or to intertidal areas below the mean high water mark. Carefully follow label cautions and directions to reduce hazards to children, pets, and non-target wildlife. So it's like a biological weapon almost? That'll prove interesting later. Section 15, regulatory information. Precautionary statements. Contains the calcium mobilizer cholecalciferol. Remember how I told you it would pull calcium out of the bones? Like mobilize it? Harmful if swallowed or absorbed through the skin. Harmful if swallowed. How are you taking your D supplements these days, folks? Or absorbed through the skin. Maybe you got one of those fancy transdermal Ds. Keep away from children, domestic animals, and pets. Do not get an eyes on skin or on clothing. Which part of harmless to humans lines up with that safety sheet? It might kill your children or your pets or wildlife, but it's harmless to you. You keep believing them, they'll keep doing it to you. So let's go into now. Well, we know, okay, so we know pets. We know mice and rats. We know pets. Well, that safety data sheet seemed to suggest that it's dangerous to children and adults. So let's go. Is it harmless to any other animals? Let's just go into this. Acute vitamin D3 toxicosis in horses, even bigger. Case reports and experimental studies of the comparative toxicity of vitamins D2 and D3. From the abstract, acute vitamin D toxicosis was diagnosed in 2 horses fed a grain ration containing 1,102,311 IU of cholecalciferol, D3, which ends up being 500,000 IU per pound in the food for about 30 days, 1 month. You ever heard of these doctors giving short-term megadoses of vitamin D for when you're sick? Horse 1 died acutely with extensive mineralization of cardiovascular and other soft tissues. Let me interject here. There was a pretty big name doctor that people noted, brought my attention to on Facebook, who recently died after advising for this little viral issue that's going around, megadosing vitamin D and vitamin A together. What do you think that would cost? Hypercalcemia. What can just vitamin D alone do in a very short time? Kill a horse. We'll get into how it kills humans too, but let's just say that we know that an overdose of vitamin D can kill humans and horses. And let's just say we look back to the 1974 New York Times article where a scientist killed himself in 10 days by taking about 100,000 units of vitamin A a day, and he drank a gallon of carrot juice a day. 10 days. He lasted 10 days. What do you think killed him? Hypercalcemia, maybe? Low potassium, maybe? All of it together, probably. So we now know that vitamin A, short-term, high doses, is lethal. And we now know that vitamin D in mammals, short-term, high dose, is lethal. Okay. You go ahead and take your cod liver oil. You guys argue your cod liver oil is good for you to me all day long. It doesn't hurt me. It's only going to hurt you. Horse 2, which had severe clinical signs and clinico-pathologic changes of toxicosis, was treated with non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and recovered in about 6 months. So for those of you who think, well, I stopped taking my vitamin D based on this video, and it's a month later and I'm not all better yet, you got time. You better settle in and wait. Your body needs time to get rid of it. So now, before we get into the human issues with vitamin D, I thought I'd take a little detour here and go into some of the other things that vitamin D has been researched for, as in potentially as a use in biological weaponry. Okay? Now, I just want to find something interesting. So what I'm telling you is I'm going to get into, they have researched vitamin D as a biological weapon. In South Africa, during apartheid. There's some other interesting things in this article that I'm going to hit on. I'm not going to discuss them too much because of the climate around certain websites and what they will and will not allow to be talked about. But I just I wanted to draw some similarities between what I'm about to read and what's going on today. And first I wanted to mention some things that are known about Mr. Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation. What do they support? So I'm not saying anything good or bad here. I'm just going to say, what do they support? I can tell you that Bill Gates' favorite vitamin is vitamin A. Bill Gates obviously supports vaccines. Bill Gates supports birth control. You might want to watch my birth control and what it does to vitamin A video here on this channel. And Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation, has supported Planned Parenthood, abortions, and birth control. Okay? I'm not saying anything good or bad about that. I'm just saying those are the things that he supports. And the Gates Foundation has said, I believe themselves, that they support population control or population reduction. Okay. Bill Gates' TED Talk, he said that in there. We do a great job on birth control and vaccines and healthcare, of which nutrition is healthcare, which might be vitamin A. We could reduce the population by about 10 to 15%. And then there was some giant dancing around what that actually meant by people on the internet, the fact checkers. Okay? So just remember those things, right? A vitamin, vaccines, and birth control. Now we're going to go into this. This is from a paper called a website called Chemista. I don't know, I could be pronouncing it completely wrong, and I apologize. But this guy was going into a lot of things about the history and the poisoning of people. So this is from the web page is Secrets and Lies. Wouter, I don't know how to pronounce that, Wouter Basson and South Africa's Chemical and Biological Warfare Program by Marlene Berger and Chandra Gould. Excerpt and its US CIA origins. Okay. So here we go. Secrets and Lies, Wouter Basson and South Africa's Chemical and Biological Warfare Program by Marlene Berger and Chandra Gould provides important clarity of their organizational structure and technologies that they utilize against us all. I came to learn of this book in reading Harriet Washington's extraordinary book, Medical Apartheid. Here's the quote from that book. The South African bioterrorism campaign depended upon very close relationship with US scientists despite the supposed isolation imposed upon South African scientists by the international embargoes of the 1980s until 1993. Basson and his minions could not have undertaken biological warfare without the support of the US government. From 1981 until 1993, the United States supported Wouter Basson's weaponization programs by financing close collaborations with US scientists and by sponsoring Basson's sojourns to the United States for conferences and education. For example, in 1983, Basson attended a closed Department of Defense conference on biological and chemical warfare in San Antonio. During his trial, Basson recounted his participation in the 1981 federal conference in San Antonio with Army officers from the United States, West Germany, Japan, Britain, and Canada. He declared, quote, I must confirm that the structure of the CBWP project was based on the US system. That's where we learned the most, end quote. Moving on. Goosen testified that he, Basson, and Immelman talked about developing covert chemical and biological weapons, such as a substance that could be smeared on a car door handle, which would cause whoever opened the door to be poisoned. They came to the conclusion that the ideal poison for such an application would be an organophosphate, which research had shown was most effectively absorbed through the skin. So organophosphates are typically used as pesticides. It is said by some people argue chemically it's not technically this, but other people say chemically, yes, it is, that glyphosate is an organophosphate chemical. So they were trying to weaponize pesticides in the same category that many people feel glyphosate is within, as biological weapons that you could die from by simply getting it on your skin. Interesting. Do you know that glyphosate actually slows down vitamin A detox in the body? Weird that those things go together, isn't it? Now, here's a really interesting part. So I'm just going to read this and not put any judgments on it. Remember what we just talked about earlier about the shots and who's a big fan of them. The so-called fertility project of the RLL and Delta G received widespread media attention during the TRC hearings. Van Rensburg and Goosen testified that discussions about the population explosion in South Africa gave rise to the idea of developing a vaccine that would prevent reproduction. This is in the 80s. Van Rensburg thought that the project, which he believed was in line with the World Health Organization's attempts to curb rising global birth rates, would bring RRL international acclaim and funding. He was encouraged, he said, by Bassan, who told him that the military needed an anti-fertility vaccine that could be administered through food so that female Unitas soldiers would not fall pregnant. While skeptical of the reasons given, Van Rensburg committed himself and his colleagues to the development of an anti-fertility vaccine that could be administered orally without the knowledge of recipients. Both Goosen and Van Rensburg believed that the intention was to secretly give the contraceptive to Black South African women. At the end of that paragraph, it says, a vaccine of the kind envisaged was never produced. Well, later there was that little thing about tetanus in the tetanus vaccines with HCG in them that seemed to be causing people in various third world countries to become infertile. And then now, very recently, it has become known that Russia is developing a COVID vaccine that is provided to people in a yogurt-like substance. Just coincidences, probably just coincidences that governments were paying for and overseeing the purposeful development of an anti-fertility vaccine. I'm sure they would totally tell us if they developed it. They would probably shout it from the rooftops that now they have this thing that can make you infertile for the rest of your life. Sure, they would totally tell us if they made it, right? Secret government programs love to tell you what they make. Let's go into this next part. In RRL's laboratories, death sometimes came swiftly within minutes, but it could take hours, even days. Records of clinical tests with cholecalciferol, or vitamin D3, show that dogs given 3 consecutive overdoses of the substance took 4 to 7 days to die. Vervet monkeys fed a low dosage over a 30-day period died of heart failure 65 days after first ingesting the substance. suffering nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, itching, disorientation, and peripheral nerve damage in the interim. Vervet monkeys fed a low dosage over a 30-day period. Died of heart failure 65 days after first ingesting the substance. Fed it to them for 30 days, low dosage. 65 days later, they died. Remember how I'm telling you this stuff takes a long time to get out of your system? So remember how we talked about rat poison being anticoagulants, first level? Tests with brodifacoum, interesting that coumadin is in there. Tests with brodifacoum used commercially in rat poison caused a monkey to bleed to death from the femoral artery while organophosphates attacked the central nervous system of baboons within 8 hours of being applied to a small patch of naked skin. Pesticides, glyphosate, vitamin D, anticoagulants, vitamin D3 is in that group of these things they were researching to covertly kill people. And you're going and buying it at the store and taking it. Hopefully not after this. So now that we went over that poisoning stuff, I'm sure they'd tell you if they ever used it on people, right? So can vitamin D in excessive doses kill or hurt or kill people? Hurt, maim, or kill people? Yes. Here's a paper called Vitamin D Intoxication Caused by Drugs Bought Online. Sky-high daily dosage for 6 months resulted in severe hypercalcemia. I'm just going to read this whole abstract. There's a bunch more out there. Intoxication with vitamin D may lead to severe hypercalcemia, renal failure, kidney failure, and occasionally to death. They got more than one reference on death from a vitamin. An increasing amount of vitamin D supplement is sold over the counter or over the internet. Here we present a case where a person obtained vitamin D over the internet and administered 50,000 IU daily to his father for a period of 6 months. In the pursuit to stop or reverse the progression of a vascular dementia, the treatment resulted in severe hypercalcemia and recurrent hospitalizations. In cases with an unexplained hypercalcemia, maybe you've had high blood calcium and nobody can figure it out, being associated with high levels of 25-hydroxyvitamin D3, the possibility of an intake of D vitamin sold without a doctor's prescription should be investigated. So let's say 6 months, they gave 50,000 IU a day. And let's say you're out there taking 5,000 units a day. It would take you 10 times longer to get to the cumulative dose. So 6 months, 180 days, 1,800 days. It might take you 5.5 years to get to that cumulative dose. And then in 5.5 years, you're going to be like, but I've been taking 5,000 IUs vitamin D every day, doc. It can't possibly be that. That's the slow poisoning. You ever hear about, how people could poison their spouse with arsenic? They do it a little teeny bit a day and it builds up in them. Fat-soluble vitamins or toxins slowly accumulate in your liver if you're not getting rid of more of it than you're taking in. Here's a sad story. 10-year-old dies due to vitamin D overdose. And then they ask the question, can too much of it be toxic? Durr. According to doctors in AIIMS, the child was advised to consume the supplement for physical development. However, the overdose of the tablets for continuous 21 days shot up the supplement level in his body by 30 times above the normal level. Subsequently, there was heavy accumulation of calcium in the intestine, which resulted in his death. Here's a quote. There is a trend of overdose of vitamin D, and that too without consulting doctors, said AIIMS's psychiatrist. Next part. According to senior medical consultant Dr. M.L. Volley, quote, excessive usage of vitamin D leads to accumulation of calcium in arteries, which may in turn obstruct the blood flow. This leads to heart attack or brain hemorrhage. So let's do a couple of things there just to wrap this up. You guys may have heard of a scan that they do to try to see how blocked up your arteries are. And everybody goes, but it's cholesterol that blocks your arteries. Well, what the test is that they use to scan your carotid artery for blockages, it's called the coronary calcium score. Go look it up. They are observing the calcium in your carotid artery. That's why they call it a coronary calcium score. And the more calcium they find in there, the more blocked up it is. Calcium deposits causing problems in people. What are two things that I advise against? Vitamin A and vitamin D by mouth. It acts differently by mouth. So what we're going to talk about now, vitamin D acts differently by mouth. The proteins involved are different. And what I'm going to tell you is, you want to learn more about this, go find Jim Stephenson Jr. His last name is spelled Stephenson, Jim Stephenson Jr. on Facebook, and ask him about it. But purposely go look back through his posts, because he re-explains this all the time, and you can find it rather than hounding him to find it for you. Okay? He has figured out how vitamin D by mouth acts completely different to stuff that your own body makes from the sun, from having adequate magnesium levels, which I assess in people via hair mineral analysis, and also having adequate zinc levels. Zinc I assess in people using both blood tests and hair tests, so we get the full picture. Getting some light, whether it's sunlight or ultraviolet B. And then the last thing that people don't realize is that vitamin D and vitamin A are antagonistic to each other. So what I'm going to tell you is, if you consistently go into the doctor and you consistently have low vitamin D, no matter what you do, maybe you have too much of a vitamin D antagonist in your system that your doctor doesn't look at or even care about, or even think you could probably become poisoned by it, called vitamin A. Last thing, the blood test that they use to test people for vitamin D is 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, or some people call it 20. The 25 at the start is the key thing, 25 by itself. And then it's either hydroxy written out or OH, same thing. And then they might either have cholecalciferol at the end or vitamin D3. Okay? That is one of the storage forms of vitamin D in your body. And this is the one that doctors and scientists try to say that if you're low in, then you're vitamin D deficient. Well, what you actually want to get run, if you're going to look into this, is what's called 1,25 dihydroxy, or I think they put a 2OH in front of it to indicate the dihydroxy, and then either cholecalciferol or vitamin D3. This is what is considered the active form of vitamin D. This is the stuff that will turn you into a statue where you stand, basically. It will calcify you if it gets too high. And what is commonly seen, well, first of all, personally, I have never seen a low, I forgot my mic. I'm just going to put it up there. I hope you guys can hear it. I'm going to apologize. Sorry, I'll put it on now. The dangers of doing live streams. There's no going back.
Anyway, Jim, I believe I've never seen a low 125 dihydroxycholecalciferol, the active form of vitamin D. And I'm pretty sure that if I recall what Jim said, he's never seen a low 1,25 dihydroxy vitamin D. So we've never actually seen a low active form of vitamin D. What we have both seen, though, is when people take vitamin D supplements and they're 25 hydroxy, the storage form stays about the same. Maybe even you've seen it go down. Maybe it goes up a little bit, but it doesn't start going up until you start taking megadoses for a lot of people. What's happening that whole time is their active form of vitamin D is going through the roof. And they're calcifying where they stand. So I'm going to have to go back and listen to this and see if I can even hear the sound, or if I'm going to have to delete this and do it over again. So anyway, hope you got something out of it. I may redo it. I probably will have to. This will be the third time. So anyway, hope you all enjoyed it. My name is Dr. Garrett Smith of nutritionrestored.com and nutritiondetective.work. And we can get this vitamin D out of people. We can get this vitamin A out of people, and we can have people feeling a lot better. That's what we try to do every day. And if you are worried about vitamin A deficiency, I can tell you that this guy has been minimizing my vitamin A intake for 2.5 years now. I apparently am still alive and doing just fine, and my eyesight is fine, and everything else is just fine. So maybe you've been misled. I also don't take vitamin D supplements. I make sure to get light. I make sure to get my magnesium correctly addressed. I make sure to get my zinc correctly addressed. And I avoid vitamin A. I should be completely wrong according to modern medicine, right? Apparently I'm not. So anyway, y'all have a great day. Talk to you later.